Predictions market Kalshi adding former CFTC Commissioner Brian Quintenz to their board of directors. You can make bets on everything from the weather to legislative lawmaking on Kalshi. And just last November, the platform received CFTC approval to become a designated contract market. Joining us now to discuss is Brian Quintenz. Hello there, Brian. Thanks for coming on to the show this morning. So in September, you joined Andreessen Horowitz as a part-time advisor. What are you hoping to achieve in this new role?
Thank you, Christine, Lawrence, Emily. It's great to see you again. I've always been fascinated with prediction markets. I've always thought that open markets and free markets are an incredible source of information and price discovery for the economy, for businesses, for society as a whole. And Kalshi, as the first regulated, true, dedicated prediction market, I think is going to provide that opportunity to market participants, the media, and society through a regulated venue, which I'm very proud to be a part of.
Brian, congratulations on your new role. Given that you are a former regulator, that has some advantages in that you can probably speak a little bit more openly about regulatory matters. So let's just have some real talk here. Like, what do you see as the biggest regulatory challenges right now in the United States? I mean, do you think that the U.S. is really doing well in terms of crypto regulation, and where do you see the most problematic areas?
Well, I think I would like to see it do better. I think there's been a turf battle among newly appointed heads of regulatory agencies to try to bring some aspect of crypto into their jurisdiction, applying old regulations and old law to new technology, possibly regardless of the consequences to either the investors and consumers of those digital assets or the future innovation that crypto and Web3 can provide to society and the economy. So I'd like to see a more thoughtful, coordinated approach, one that doesn't just look at existing authorities and try to fit, a square peg into a round hole. I would like to see Congress be more engaged. I think this is an opportunity for Congress to provide the deliberation that it was meant to over significant policy issues in a way that puts members of Congress on the record and face accountability for their actions. And hopefully that accountability is positive because they've done something that is productive for this innovation. But we'll have to see. I think that there are a lot of different speeches going around. There are a lot of different views going around. Some want to fit stablecoins into a certain segment, regardless of how they're regulated under state law or what they look like from a banking function or a lack of a banking function. Some want to categorize all tokens as securities and therefore require trading venues to register as exchanges, but yet there's no clarity on why some tokens are securities or which ones even are. And even in Commissioner Benham's confirmation hearing to be the chair of the CFTC, there was discussion by Chairwoman Stabenow of the Senate Agriculture Committee about creating new authorities for the CFTC to be involved, which, depending on the outcomes of that, I think could make some sense. But regardless, I think it's important for Congress to deliberate this in the way that the Constitution contemplated so that we can have a good and productive policy result.
Thanks, Brian. That's a really interesting analysis. I just want to follow up quickly on your comment about turf battles, because turf battles are sort of the most Washington thing ever, right? Like everybody in Washington is just fighting turf battles all the time. It's like what people do. But is there anything specific about crypto? Like how would you describe the turf battles over crypto? Is it that people kind of just want a piece of the action? Like they see this as an opportunity and so they want to kind of make it part of their portfolio, or are they worried that it's not being regulated enough? I'm just curious, like how you would characterize this particular turf battle.
Well, I think individuals' motivations vary, and it's hard for me to speculate on any individual's motivations. I think anybody can do that and reach their own reasonable conclusions about why one person is advocating to take this under their jurisdiction versus another. I think that there is an interest by businesses and service providers to operate in a way that has high integrity. And if that means that regulation and registration can provide that in a way that doesn't destroy their functionality and doesn't destroy investor confidence in the assets and doesn't destroy value, I think everybody's open to that. But I also, want to be careful because as you look at this community, I think it's been remarkable that this is a community, the crypto community, that has really embraced individual responsibility for their decisions. And I think that needs to be protected. It needs to be honored. It needs to be recognized that we have a $2.53 trillion market of tradable value that has grown without, the purview of the government, heavy-handedly or big-footedly stepping in and saying this is wrong or you need to do things in this way. So I think that there are a lot of different models, but again, hopefully that's why Congress comes in, if something is going to happen, to make very clear what the right regulatory approach is for crypto assets, for crypto businesses, for crypto service providers, in a way that's thoughtful and allows for debate and allows for elected officials to face accountability for their decisions.
So, Commissioner Quintenz, I mean, you basically touched on it, but it's along those lines. There's a stablecoin report that came out. Does it show that the government really doesn't have any teeth right now when it comes to stablecoins? It doesn't right now have any jurisdiction or knows what it is when it comes to some of these larger ones, such as the Tethers and USDCs of the world. And should government regulators be on top of those things, or should they leave them alone and let the free market decide what their true value is, whether or not they should be worth $1? I mean, shouldn't it be caveat emptor?
So, I mean, I want to be clear. I mean, I think that there is value that appropriately calibrated regulation can provide to market integrity and to confidence. That doesn't mean that it's absolutely necessary. And I am always wary of what I kind of think of as anecdotal regulation, where you pick, the one bad actor or the one awful example in a space and create an entirely new regulatory regime around that, regardless of the diversity of the space or how other actors are behaving or how much that one example actually impacts the marketplace. And so, I think as Congress and the government consider the impact of stablecoins now, what they are empowering in terms of DeFi and, the future of the Web3 economy, I think it's important that they realize that whatever they do, they shouldn't preclude that innovation. As well as, realizing that they have to treat similar things in a similar function. If you force it into a banking structure or only to be issued by depository institutions that are insured by the FDIC, there are a whole host of minimum capital requirements that come along with that. And so, I don't necessarily know how that impacts that kind of business model. And the other issue that can come along there is that, if the government takes an action that is destructive, this innovation will find a way to flourish in a way that's legal, but possibly outside of, that regulatory decision making that's arbitrary. So, the innovation can evolve to meet the functionality and, how we can see, the future of this space. If the government does something that's too preclusive of that value creation.
So, on a somewhat related note, Saule Omarova is going in front of Congress right now, and she's considered a very controversial pick to run the OCC, primarily because of some of the previous papers that she's written on banking. That she's been accused of basically wanting to get rid of private banking, essentially, and have it all go to the Fed. Do you think that, what do you make of it? I mean, do you think that these concerns are overblown, or do you think that it may fundamentally at least change how the involvement of the federal government is in money, and what would it mean for crypto?
Well, as someone that went through the confirmation process twice, actually, I think that anyone needs to be expected to answer for the record, to the extent that they have a record and to the extent that they put themselves out there publicly, espousing certain beliefs or discussing, certain frameworks. And I think it is absolutely fair to ask about those things. I think the responses, to those questions should be incorporated into each senator's decision in terms of their confirmation vote on that or on any other nominee, for financial regulatory or even just, a government appointment. I think it's important. As I think about this, I mean, if people show you who they are, you should believe them. And there are plenty of people who have faced confirmation over the last 4 years who had their records and their writings heavily examined during their confirmation process and didn't necessarily get through the confirmation process because of it. So I think an examination of a record is very fair. I think tough questions about someone's individual beliefs are very fair, because once they're confirmed, once people in especially independent agencies are confirmed to lead them, they have a lot of power to make decisions using a lot of flexibility in the law, and can do so in a way that doesn't necessarily provide a lot of accountability to Congress or to the American people. So I think these decisions have to be made very carefully.
Do you think she's too radical to run the OCC?
Well, I think that there are a lot of other candidates that could probably provide more stability in terms of the potential outcomes of regulatory decision making. So I don't want to put labels on anybody. People may decide put similar labels on me, and I think the important part of the confirmation process is to have the dialogue, is to have the record come out, is to face tough questions, to consider responses. If someone gets through the confirmation process successfully, to hold them accountable for their answers.